Hello and welcome to the final lesson, lesson 3. Even though it says lesson 4 here, you can forget about that, don't worry. Lesson 3 in module 2. We're going to look at some other strategies for factoring quadratic expressions. So let's get into it here. So we're asked to factor these quadratic expressions here. So let's take a look at the first one. All right, you'll notice that there is a GCF that we can factor out. And anytime we're asked to factor something, it's always a good idea, right? Asked to factor here, it's always a good idea to factor out GCF first. Or ask yourself, is there a GCF? And here there is. What can we take out from all three terms here? All three terms are divisible by 2. Now we have to ask, can we factor any further? Can this factor any more? So remember, since we have a quadratic, okay, and we have a lead coefficient now of 1 inside here, we can look for two numbers that multiply to make, what should we multiply to make here? Multiply to make 12, and we want those two numbers, those same two numbers to add to make what? 10. Okay, so can you think of two numbers that multiply to make 12? Let's see here. To multiply to 12, we could use 1 and 12. We could use 2 and 6, 3 and 4, or we could reverse those, 4, 3, 6, 2, 12, 1, right? None of these add to make 10. So in other words, this doesn't factor any further. That's the farthest we can factor this. Now, factoring this quadratic is going to be a little bit harder. Okay, first of all, is there a GCF? And the answer is no, there isn't. So what do we do here? Because we have a lead coefficient of 6. Well, so let me work you through it here, and then we'll show you a strategy. So in this situation, right, we cannot use the strategy of just multiplying to something and adding to it. I mean, so you could look at this and say, okay, we want something that multiplies -6 but adds to make +5. So if we tried that strategy here, we can do that, right? Multiply to -6 and add to 5, to a +5. Well, for -6, it would be +6 and -1. They would multiply -6 and add to 5. And so you might say, well, here's the answer then. It's just going to be x plus 6 and x minus 1, right? Because they multiplied -6 and they add to make a +5. But here's the problem. If I were to multiply these two things back together, I would not get my original question. Right? I would have x times x, which would be x squared, x times -1 minus 1x, 6, oops, let me do it this way, oh boy, 6 times x, which is going to be 6x, 6 times -1 minus 6. Combine like terms, you get x squared plus 5x minus 6. So we got this right, and we got this right, but we don't have a 6 here like we need. So this does not work. And the reason is because we have this lead coefficient of 6. That strategy kind of falls apart a little bit. So what can we do instead? Well, right now what we could look at is say, okay, we need to make a 6x squared. So to do that, there's two ways to make a 6x squared. We could do 6x and x, or we could do 3x and 2x, like that. And then we kind of pick two numbers here and here that will multiply to make that -6. And then we have to kind of like work it out to see if we also then get that plus 5x. So I'm going to start right here, I think. I have a feeling just from my experience and stuff like that, that this is the way to go. And so let's see here. I'm going to try, let's see. Let's do a +3 and a -2 right here. Okay, and again, some of it's just practice and experience, but let's multiply it out. 3x times 2x, 6x squared. 3x times a 3, 9x. -2 times 2, -4x. -2 times 3, -6. Combine like terms, and there it is. So this is the factored version right here. Okay, that's pretty tricky to do though, because you have to do a lot of guessing and checking potentially, and a lot of multiplying it out. How can we make it faster? Well, here's a strategy. Consider the product AC, 6 times -6. Where's A and C? Where did that come from? So in order, the number 6 is the A, the positive 5 is the B, the negative 6 is the C. And so the strategy we can use is multiply A times C and we get negative 36. Okay? When we multiply those numbers together, we then use this to think of a new problem as x squared plus 5x minus 36. So we kind of like take this original quadratic, we get rid of that 6, we kind of multiply it back with a negative 6 there, and we kind of transform it into this new quadratic here. Now why is that helpful? Because we have a much easier time factoring this, don't we? We need to just think of two numbers that multiply to make negative 36 and add to make a 5x. So let's do that here. Okay, so two numbers that multiply to make negative 36 would be positive 9 and negative 4, and they also add to 5, right? So those are our two numbers. Now, how do we use those two numbers? So those are not our answers. So again, our answer is not going to be, because remember, we're trying to factor this, not factor this. But we're going to use this to help us. These numbers are going to be important. These two numbers right here that we get from factoring this secondary problem tell us how to solve this one too. We're going to take this quadratic here and we're going to break it up like so. See how that 5x we rewrote using the minus 4 and the 9 that we got right here. Okay, now we can group here. We can group these first two. You see how they did that right here. And we can group these second two. You see how they did that right here. And from those groups, we can factor out a GCF now. So factor the GCF out of this, and it's a 2x, and you're left with a 3x minus 2. Factor the GCF out of this, it's a 3, and you're left with a 3x minus 2. And notice that you have the same leftovers. You can then furthermore take out that 3x minus 2, factor out a 3x minus 2, which leaves you behind with a 2x and a plus 3. So there's 2x plus 3, there's 3x minus 2, and that is how our 6x squared plus 5x minus 6 factors right to that. Okay? So in the next video, we'll do some more practice with that, just so you guys can see it in action.